Since our first graduation in 1866, it has been the custom at North Central College for a distinguished speaker to share a message of insight and inspiration. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce John Daniels, North Central class of 1969, partner and chair emeritus of Quarles & Brady Law Firm. John has been honored multiple times as one of the country's leading attorneys and as a visionary community leader. He's also a talented business manager and co-owner of 130 franchises. John is a proud North Central College alumnus who was fearless in breaking through barriers to success. He has some very wise words to share with you today that will challenge your outlook and aspirations, regardless of the career you pursue. Please join me in welcoming John Daniels as our speaker today.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's great to be back at North Central College, and certainly to the president, the trustees, faculties, and friends, but most importantly, the family and the students who are graduating today. This is a very special day for all of you. It's a day that I say that you will remember for the rest of your life. It's completely different than thousands of other days that will be here that you will follow. And sometimes on graduation day, something is said that sort of sticks with you for the rest of your life. So I thought I would like to share with you 3 brief stories about graduation days that have been important to me and my family. And when I say important, I mean things that really resonate with you and that you remember and that cause you to reflect on the kind of life that you want to conduct. But before I do that, I want to take a point of personal privilege and introduce a few people who are here with me today, and I would ask them to stand. First, my wife, Irma, who went to University of Wisconsin, but who spent a fair number of weekends down here at North Central. My son, John, and his wife, Erica Joy, my grandson, John, and fellow classmates from North Central College, Phyllis Eatlin, Judy Elamin, and my college roommate, Don Schultz. So thank you very much. So I want to give you some context for these stories because they occur at very different times in my life. The very first story I want to share with you, I think, will resonate with a number of the people who are here today who are parents. And it was a graduation of my daughter, Inez, about 4 years ago. And Inez graduated from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. Inez's graduation speaker was Oprah Winfrey. Now, for the graduates, you have me. So there's something to remember already. As you remember, as I recall that graduation, Oprah gave a wonderful speech, and obviously, you know, a tremendous international star. But frankly, that really wasn't what left me with a memory of that graduation that was important. Rather, it was the baccalaureate address the day before the graduation, much as the baccalaureate address occurred here at North Central yesterday evening. And as I was sitting there, the baccalaureate speaker said that as he was going off, leaving college, as many of you will be now, his mother gave him only one admonition. And that admonition was to be careful. I thought, and then he repeated, careful, careful. And then I realized that he was talking about something deeper than the word care. He was talking about how you care and take care of other people in your life. And it resonated with me because it was something that was instilled in me many, many years ago at Pfeiffer Hall during what were then mandatory chapel services. And I can remember the enriching environment that occurred there. You know, careful people are people who you don't really have to be in contact with every day. They just have a tremendous impact on your life. I want to share with you an example of one of those people who had that kind of impact on my life and had an indirect connection to North Central College. That person was a woman named Bernice Lindsay. And Bernice Lindsay was a very short woman, about 4 feet 10 inches. She was a social worker. She had a burning desire, however, to make sure that inner city youngsters in the city of Milwaukee were exposed to cultural assets. We all know how important cultural assets are. I had the chance yesterday afternoon to, again, Mr. President, experience a remarkable Wentz facility here. But it also took me back decades before, when I was a North Central student myself, and we'd get on the bus and we'd go into to the city of Chicago, and we would see the wonderful cultural assets. And Mrs. Lindsay wanted kids who didn't have those kind of opportunities to have similar opportunities. So here this woman was, a social worker. She mortgaged everything in her life and created something called the Creative Center. The Creative Center was designed to instill in young people the value of art. After my junior year here at North Central College, Mrs. Lindsay called me up and she said, "Would you like to be an intern at the Creative Center?" And I said, "Great." So I went over and I spent the entire summer interning with these students. And I watched Mrs. Lindsay with the wonderful care that she provided for every one of these students. And then at the very end of the day, Mrs. Lindsay would say, "Johnny, just always be careful." So when I heard that story at that baccalaureate address, it totally resonated with me. So I got a call a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, from baseball legend Henry Aaron and his wife. And they said, "John, we want you to do something." I said, "What is that?" They said, "We'd like you to create an internship program for young students from Milwaukee to encourage them to see the world a different way. And we want to promote having these students go off to Morehouse College." So I thought back to my days of here over at Pfeiffer Hall. I thought about the notion of being careful, and immediately I said yes. Now, it's called something called the MKE Fellows, and it's received a fair amount of national recognition, but that's not really what has been important to me. Rather, what's been important to me was just a few weeks ago, I was at Morehouse College for graduation similar to this, where our first group of graduates came out of college. These were young men who 5 years ago no one thought could be successes, yet 80% of them graduated with honors and several Phi Beta Kappas. So I knew that my life had been enriched by what I learned at Pfeiffer Hall and from Mrs. Lindsay. The second story I want to share with you really comes from my own graduation at Harvard Law School more than 40 years ago. And as the graduation ceremony was being completed, the dean of the law school walked over to me and my family, much as the president will greet many of you later today, and he said to me, he says, "John," he says, "it is impossible to know what your future will be. No one knows that." He said, "But never let the bean counters define your vision for the future." I thought, wow, this is something pretty incredible from this academic to inspire me. And then I sort of realized over time that if you have a pope who can touch Catholics and non-Catholics with compassion, if you can have a minister not even 35 years of age from the Deep South destroy decades of racial intolerance in the country, you can change things. So embedded in my dean's comment to me at Harvard was really what I share with the graduates today. We, of course, all have to recognize and acknowledge reality. But don't let historical boundaries define who and what you are. Don't be guided by what things appear to be safe. Always be willing to connect the dots and to remember that you can indeed change the world. And that too is something worth remembering. One final brief story. And of course, it would have to be from my own graduation here at North Central College more than 45 years ago. And I will have to be candid. So like many of the graduates here, when you think back a few years, you won't remember who that commencement speaker was. I don't remember who my commencement speaker was. I do remember this, however. His message was, just be authentic. Be authentically yourself no matter what. You know, one of the things that you learn in life is that you're going to have many relationships. Some of those relationships will be what I would describe as unauthentic. And I intentionally use that phrase in counter-distinction to saying inauthentic relationships, because I don't mean that these relationships do not have substance. Rather, what I want to describe to you is a little bit what the speaker who preceded me described, that good friendships and relationships are really critical and important. Undoubtedly, here at North Central, one of the wonderful benefits of being in a school like this is you get a chance to create those kind of relationships with friends. You saw a few of the friends that I developed here more than 45 years ago. You know, but there's a backstory to those friendships. Phyllis Eatlin, I think, came from Gary Roosevelt High School in Gary. Judy, I believe, came from Cleveland, and my roommate Don, he was from Neenah. Very different, but we developed wonderful relationships. I want to illustrate the point for you in a much more personal way. You know, I mentioned Don, and Don and I were roommates for a couple of years here at North Central. And last night we had dinner and we were sharing stories. I can tell the students one thing. 40 years from now, when you sit down with your roommate, the stories, the way you remember them, and the stories they will remember them will be very different. So I'm gonna write down my memory and share it with Don so he doesn't get confused in the future as to things that we did here at North Central. Well, Don was from Neenah, Wisconsin. He called it a city, I called it a town. I was from Milwaukee. He was from a small family. I was from a big family. And certainly, other than the circumstances of being here at North Central, we probably had so many differences that no one would have imagined that we would become lifelong friends. Not on its surface, a lot in common. But through our college years, first as a matter of simply being assigned, and I say assigned, I have to be honest, when I came to North Central, Mr. President, my second year, and I'm sure it was my fault, not the college, I really didn't have a room. Don had a room, and that's how we became roommates. He said, come on in. Well, we'll put 5 students in what was then Old Kraler Hall, clearly in violation of the student protocol here, and that was how we first became roommates. We never lived in the same community after college, yet we remained and had a lifelong bond. Authentic relationships are really, really important, and they're rewarding for your lifetime. So I share with you one final story for you. I happen to love Florida. I happen to love warm weather. And one of the rites of passages for college students when I was here was at spring break, you'd all head off to Florida. And while it may be difficult for the graduates now to realize, it was not a foregone conclusion in the 1960s that roommates of different races would actually travel safely to Florida. I happen to do a lot of business in Florida as chairman of our law firm later. What I remember about that experience in 1968 is the wonderful bonding that I had with a person who was from Neenah, Wisconsin. I was from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as we grapple and struggle with those issues. So I say to you that you're going to have in the globe in which you operate, a globe that is increasingly smaller, the possibility for having friendships and alliances that you could not imagine. I encourage you to do that. And that too is worth remembering. As you embark upon your careers or graduate education or the things that you want to pursue, don't let others define your relationships. Don't let them define what may be for them impossible, but what for you will be a lifelong value. And that, I assure you, is something, if you remember nothing else that I say today, you will remember for the rest of your life. So to North Central College today, I say to you, the things that I learned more than 45 years ago in Pfeiffer Hall, reinforced by Mrs. Lindsay: be careful. I say to the graduates of North Central College today, in the words of my Harvard Law School dean, be fearless. And I might encourage the graduates sometime when you get a few moments to Google a fearless graduate of North Central College in 1946, Reverend Nicholas Hurd. And finally, I say to you, no matter what, just be authentic. Be yourself. I certainly had a wonderful experience here at North Central College. I grew over those years, and I appreciate what North Central College did for me. North Central, thank you for all of those opportunities. Thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to be here with you on this very special day. And indeed, Mr. President, it is a special day because it's also my birthday.